Hello and welcome. Today I'm in the Tier 9 Japanese aircraft carrier, the Taiho, and this is a match I played recently on the NA server. It's not an amazing match in my opinion, however, because I know that you guys like watching me play carriers, and since I don't play them as often, I figured I would share it anyway. So I launched my torpedo bombers first, fighter second, and dive bombers third, and now I want to try something interesting. You see, I don't really use the F1, F2 and F3 keys in this game. However, I do use the 7, 8, 9 keys for the dive bombers obviously, but pressing them is slightly annoying, so I want to try to train myself to press the F1, F2 and F3 keys instead of the 7, 8, 9 keys, which is why I put these keybinds in. You see, look at how I select my torpedo bombers just now. What I did is I pressed the 4 key, then I pressed the shift key, I held down the shift key, and then I pressed the 5 and 6 keys. So this essentially selected the other ones, and with fighters I pressed the 2 key, then I hold down shift, and then I pressed the 3 key. And dive bomber is the same. However, it's very annoying to press 7, shift, hold it down, and then 8, 9 with one hand. So I wanted to swap it to F1, F2, F3, because that'll be easier to press. Maybe F2, F3, F4 is better, but I don't quite know that one. So that's what I'll try to do. And I think this would help with the Hakuryu even more, because she has the 9 key for one of the dive bombers. So, I'm gonna drop on this Fletcher, because destroyers dictate the game quite a lot, but I'll reiterate what I've been saying again. I really dislike dropping on destroyers like this, because it's difficult. And not only is it difficult, I feel that a lot of it is down to, well, what the enemy does. And you can't always, decide things. Like right now, look, I lost 3 planes on that torpedo bomber squadron. As a result, I have to drop right there because, look, she didn't even get out from that drop. All of those died. If I hadn't dropped there, I would have had a squadron with 1 torpedo. That isn't very useful in leading enemy targets. So I had to just go with it. And that's 1/3 of my drop, doing literally nothing at all. And now I'll try to do the follow-up on this. However, a Fletcher is really maneuverable, and it's difficult to drop. I don't really know anybody that says that they can consistently hit these. Well, actually, I guess I do know people now. I've seen them in the comments. However, I don't think that they realize when they fail, or don't pay attention to it. I think there's some bias in play, because the very good players that I do notice, they do fail at this. And, I mean, if they fail, then probably the worst players or more average players do so as well. Of course, there might be an exception, but I imagine there will be like, I don't know, 5 to 10 exceptions on maybe all servers or maybe per server. That's not enough players for this to be reasonable. Like, you can't really have a general strategy with which like only a dozen players in the world can do. That doesn't seem like a very nice thing. Because, well, I guess I suppose it does work out most of the time, so maybe you're still good on dropping on destroyers, and maybe it's an alright strategy, but I do know, it definitely works, it's very powerful, I just don't like it, and because of that I do wish that it was changed in some way. This is why I prefer playing the US carriers. However, I do realize that not doing so is a huge loss on your team, because if you do take out the destroyer, that it has a huge impact. But anyways, let's talk about something you should really do as a carrier. And that is try to defend your team. But you don't really want to defend your team with fighters in the way that people expect. You shouldn't prioritize trying to keep everybody safe. It won't work out. But what you should do is you should try to repel the enemy carrier planes, or force them into engagements that are not very good. Like right now I'm repelling them all the time, and if the enemy fighters come and fight, it'll be in friendly anti-air, and that'll be somewhat useful. Now I'm gonna try dropping on this Fletcher again, but here's one of the problems with Japanese carriers, and this is that you have so many squadrons that it's, one, difficult to keep track of, and the second part is, even if you do keep track of, it'll be difficult to actually manage all of them, because you only have so many actions you can do per second or something. So you can't really do everything. So I got a nice strafe off on the enemy planes over there, and I'll try to follow up with my torpedo bombers. One of the things I really hate about this game is how when you lose track of your planes for even a moment, and you get unlucky there, like an enemy carrier does a strafe or your planes go AFK and then fly into like the mine anti-air. Losing track of your planes even for a moment has huge consequences, because if you, let's say you play a Taiho versus Taiho and it ends up being like a very long game because both teams are good or something. If the enemy gets one strafe off where he strafes all of your fighters down, he will be in the fighter lead for the rest of the game. All he has to do at that point is try to lock your fighters in a one-on-one battle, and he will win all the fighter battles until the end of the match. And then he will have fighters, you won't, and he will have a huge advantage. And because of that, I feel that making it so punishing is problematic. Because you don't really, like, even if you have enough replacements, even if you exclude, the replacement part, the problem is that in an average game, you get, like, what, 3-4 strikes? Wait, no, it's 3 strikes, maybe 4. So, if you only get that many strikes and you lose like a strike because of something like that, that means you just lost 1/4 to 1/3 of your impact on the match. Well, I suppose it's slightly less because one of the biggest impacts is still spotting, but in terms of damage, and because you don't really get rewarded for spotting, you only really get rewarded for dealing damage. Well, I guess nowadays it's more like shooting down enemy planes, which makes the situation even worse. So the Tirpitz did actually damage on earlier on that fire, so I did a follow-up, and this is a fire that will stick. So now I'll try to get him to flood and, deal some torpedo bomber damage. The one torpedo bomber squadron that was left over, I'll use it on the Edinburgh. Look, the drop on the Tirpitz, that was a failure, but I still had 3 torpedoes, I still did damage. If you fail a drop on a destroyer, well, that's it, you don't get anything. And obviously it's not good on the receiving side either. Destroyers don't like being instantly killed if it works out. While I do think that often the problem with being instantly killed on destroyers is on the destroyer, because from my experience at least, it's not that difficult to dodge these torpedo bomber drops on destroyers when carriers do it. At least, the ones that I've been subjected to. Well, I suppose it depends on the destroyer playing. Some are really poor at maneuverability, so you just cannot. But oftentimes it's alright. So I'll try to strike this one dive bomber squadron. I think I'll get, yep, I got in. Like, look, that's half of a dive bomber squadron right there. And just because he turned around in a slightly bad way. And it takes, what, like 1.5 minutes just raw time to try to recycle those planes. It's problematic if you lose track of your planes, and I think people often do, at least I do, and I would say average carrier players will do so as well, probably even more than I do. And I think this just doesn't lead to very good gameplay. At least if you compare it to, well, other types of ships. Okay, so one thing that you've noticed is that I've been trying to ward off enemy planes with my fighters, right? I spread them out over where the bulk of my ships are. However, the enemy carrier doesn't appear to be doing the same, right? You would think, oh, the enemy carrier is just worse or doesn't do it, but honestly in this game it's not really on the carrier that he's not, covering them. Because he only has one fighter squadron and his main fighting force is in the middle. The Kurfürst is in the middle of the map. And I would say that the enemy carrier should keep his planes near the Kurfürst and not near this Edinburgh and Amagi. And honestly, I think the problem is with the Amagi, Tirpitz and Edinburgh that were at the bottom here, because they just allowed me to strike as I pleased, because they obviously aren't with their team, so the planes aren't probably going to cover them. Because he can't really, like, if he tries to cover the Amagi, I can just take my planes and go strike the Kurfürst, which would be probably a worse situation for his team than if I were to strike this solo Amagi, especially since there really is no reason in regards to objectives to be in this situation. So I tried to set the Amagi on fire, but it doesn't appear that she's going to repair. But I think that's alright, because even if the Amagi doesn't repair, the alpha damage from these torpedoes should be enough to, perhaps if not kill, then get her low enough that the destroyer will be able to finish the Amagi off. Now, by the way, if you look at the minimap, you'll see that I lost track of one of my dive bombers. It's going into the anti-air of the Kurfürst, so I'll just try to, fix it and do the drop and etc. because this squadron is dead, even if I try to pull it back right now. Okay, the Amagi is gone, the drop didn't work out. And, by the way, some people will sometimes notice when I make these kinds of commentaries, oh, you're talking about that plane, but you're not using them at all, or something like that. But that's because I do post-commentary. This commentary is done after the game. This is when I look at the match later on. This isn't when I do it at the time. Like, I usually talk about what I think at the time and why. But, if I spot mistakes, then I obviously talk about it as though I know better, because I find this to be helpful. And I think that actually one of the reasons why I've got so much better at this game is because I have been doing these videos. Yes, at first I was already much better than the average player, but I think that's because I just had a lot of experience. But eventually when I started doing videos, obviously because I review the games I play, when I do the video, when I make commentary, I, notice my mistakes more, and I am probably slightly more likely to correct them if I notice them. So you saw the enemy fighters actually tried to intercept my strikes as well, because at this point the planes or the enemy ships are together, and it is possible for the fighters to cover the battleships. Now, I could take my planes to go around and try to drop on the cruiser or the Khabarovsk, but I don't want to drop on the Khabarovsk because I will likely just miss due to her speed. And the cruiser is that, well, I think the cruiser is close enough to the battleships that if the cruiser starts turning, it'll take a very long time to readjust my plane course, so these fighters might come and play anyway. So I wanted to engage the enemy fighters, and I started with a strafe. I actually expected the enemy to strafe in return, but that didn't seem to appear. So I should have a decent fighting chance in this fighter battle, but I'll use my second fighter instead of trying to hit the enemy fighters more to try to intercept the torpedo bombers. Because at this point, it's more important to try to stop the enemy from trying to deal damage than actually trying to play for the long game and try to make them run out of fighters, or, at least have a worry about running out of fighters, because the game is starting to end, and because of that, there's less value in making him run out of fighters than there is in, preventing damage on our ships. This Izuma actually just outplayed me pretty well with slowing down, or actually just not speeding up, because I expected him to speed up. If I had dropped slightly better, I would have hit 3. But I think that getting a good drop here would have been difficult anyway. So, the only battleship left is the Kurfürst, and I don't really want to go and try to drop on the Kurfürst, considering the Neptune is here, so I'll just drop on the Neptune. Only one bomb hit, but I guess it's alright. It wasn't the best drop anyway. I'll run out of one fighter squadron, but I still have another one left, and I think this should be enough to get to endgame. My planes are unlikely to actually be able to recycle here, and well, I think the game's pretty much over here. I don't really see what the enemy team can do. Sure, they might kill a ship and prolong it slightly longer, but we have at least a half HP Yamato, and I still have all my torpedo bombers. I can do a full torpedo bomber strike, and even if all of those die, I can still do 9 plane strikes. So, and because we are taking into the lead, or sorry, not taking into lead, we are in the lead by a huge amount of points, and we are almost at 1,000. I think the game's gonna end very, very soon, like in, I don't know, 15 seconds, and I don't think I'll be able to hit anything anyway. And, well, this should be the game. It was fairly alright, but it could have been better, obviously. Like, the plane control is difficult. Especially because you have a limited amount of clicks you can do. And look, I only made 294,000 credits at tier 9. I mean, this carrier economy is definitely not helping. 4,200 XP, 165,000 damage, 34 plane kills. I think it was alright. Considering the SX only got 650 XP and only 15 plane kills, I think I did fairly well. And because I was number 1 in a tier 9 game as a carrier, you know, that I think speaks volumes to how well I did, considering how difficult it is to get to number 1. Usually, you know, something else gets there. 64,000 spotting damage, it doesn't really do anything. Look, I even did CV tanking, 43,000 damage. Apparently it doesn't work. So 101,000 damage with Torpedo Alpha. Yeah, the Torpedo Alpha still is the majority of the damage. But it's still a good idea to try to dot stack, because sometimes it just goes out of control and it's very useful. And credits and XP, well, I made 105,000 profit, so I guess it's fairly alright. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, then like it, and if not, then I suppose you can dislike it. I would like to thank the patrons on Patreon. Thank you very much for your continued support, Paladov, and I hope I see you guys next time.